Well, today's worship is about that new understanding of success that Adrienne Marie Brown offers us. Let us measure success, she says, by how many of us can say, I'm living a life I don't regret. She goes on to say that I'm also attending to the crises of my time, and that I am rooted in communities doing our best to honor our ancestors and future generations to come. And she goes on to say, how can we, the future ancestors, align ourselves with the most resilient practices of our species? I love that question that asks of us, the future ancestors, how we're going to live our lives. And I think part of that definition means that we look around at the world we find and don't necessarily accept that the way things are or the way things have to be. And to me, that's part of this new understanding of success. And with that in mind, I have just the story for you. Now, Desmond the mouse lived in the most beautiful meadow in all the land. Every morning, Desmond would wake with the sunrise and spend the whole day long playing in that meadow. And every night, he would go to sleep right in the middle of that meadow under the beautiful starry sky above. One night, though, Desmond awoke to find that it was still dark out. So he tried to roll over and get more comfortable and go back to sleep, but something wasn't right. He could hardly move, and his tail was throbbing with pain. Reaching behind him, he felt that there was some sort of, it felt like some sort of huge boulder had somehow fallen just on his tail in the middle of the meadow. So he tried pushing with all of his strength to push this giant boulder away. And when that didn't work, he tried tugging on his tail, tugging to get loose with all of his might. And he tried pushing and tugging and pushing over and over again until eventually he was out of breath and had just about given up. But just then, he saw an animal pass by through the meadow. It was a tall giraffe. And so he called out, "Oh, giraffe, it seems that some sort of boulder has fallen just on my tail in the middle of the meadow. If you could use your powerful legs to nudge it, even just a few inches in the other direction, I could get free." Well, the giraffe laughed at Desmond the way giraffes do. "You silly mouse," he said. "That's no boulder that's fallen on your tail in the middle of the meadow. That is an elephant that's fallen asleep on your tail in the middle of the meadow." Well, good news, thought Desmond. In that case, if you could just gently wake the elephant and ask him to roll over even just a few inches in the other direction, I could get free. "I don't know about that," said the giraffe. Surely you must know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. I find it's best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like these. Well, Desmond sighed, I do not appreciate your neutrality. The giraffe wandered away, and Desmond tried shouting as loud as he could to wake the giant elephant. But those giant elephant ears at the way other end of that giant elephant body, they were just too far away. And Desmond's little mouse voice, it was just too quiet. So when that didn't work, he tried pushing again with all of his strength. And then he tried tugging with all of his might. And he tried shouting and pushing and tugging and pushing and shouting over and over and over again, till he had just about given up when he saw another animal pass by through the meadow. This time, it was a gazelle. And so he called out, "Oh, gazelle, it seems that an elephant has fallen asleep just on my tail in the middle of the meadow. If you could just gently wake him up and ask him to roll over even just a few inches in the other direction, I could get free." "I don't know about that," said the gazelle. Surely you know what they say about letting sleeping elephants lie. "I find it's best not to get involved in other animals' business. I find it's best to remain neutral in times like these." The gazelle wandered off, and Desmond said, almost to himself this time, "I do not appreciate your neutrality." One last time, Desmond tried shouting with all of his little mouse voice, and he tried pushing with all of his mouse strength and tugging with all of his little mouse might, and he tried shouting and pushing and tugging and pushing and shouting over and over again, till he had just about given up for the last time when he saw another animal pass by through the grass. This time it was another mouse, and when he called out, that mouse ran right over and introduced himself. He said, "My name is Nelson. What seems to be the problem?" Well, no sooner had Desmond explained the situation than Nelson ran all the way to the other end of that giant elephant body, and he shouted up to those giant elephant ears at the top of that giant elephant head. He said, "Excuse me! It seems you've fallen asleep on my friend's tail in the middle of the meadow. If you could roll over just a few inches in the other direction, he could go free." Well, the elephant heard Nelson's little mouse voice way down on the ground, but those big elephant ears at the other side of that big elephant head, they were just too far away. And his little mouse voice, it was just a bit too quiet. And you know, between you and me, I think that elephant was just a bit too comfortable. He didn't budge. So Nelson thought for a moment before he ran back to Desmond and he said, "You know, I think I might have an idea. Stay right here. Don't move." And he ran off, leaving a confused look on Desmond's face. And just when Desmond was starting to get worried again, he saw Nelson emerge back through the grass. But this time he wasn't alone. He had found 3 other mouse friends, and each of them, they had each done their job. They had each found another 3 mouse friends, and the whole group of them ran all the way to the other end of that giant elephant body, and one mouse climbed up on the shoulders of another, and another mouse climbed up on her shoulders. And one by one, they made a whole mouse ladder all the way up the back of that giant elephant head, until at last Nelson climbed up the shoulders of his friends one by one carefully till he stood right at the opening of that giant elephant ear. And he shouted with all of his voice, "Excuse me! It seems you've fallen asleep on my friend's tail in the middle of the meadow. Roll over just a few inches so he can go free." Well, this time his voice was just too loud and just too close to ignore, and so the elephant said, but then he rolled over just a few inches in the other direction. Nelson and his friends climbed back down to the ground carefully, and they met up with Desmond, and the whole group of them spent the rest of that day playing and celebrating together in the meadow. Now, Archbishop Desmond Tutu said that if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you've already taken sides. You've taken sides with the powerful and with the oppressor. And he said that if an elephant is standing on the tail of a mouse, the mouse will never appreciate your neutrality. Archbishop Tutu believed in a God who he said took sides, a God who took sides with the orphan and the widow and the oppressed everywhere. And as Unitarian Universalists, we may or may not share a belief in that same God, but we have covenanted to build a world of justice and equity and compassion. And that means imagining a world very different, painfully different from the one we see around us today. So it means that we come together in communities and congregations like this one to do together what we couldn't do alone, and to take sides for justice, to take sides for equity and compassion. And it means that we come together in community to side with love. May it be so, and may we make it so. Amen.